Hey, Krista. I haven't had a chance to talk with my wife, so I'll get back to you. We'll get back to you about your text. So let me figure out how to talk to. Hey, everybody. Jumping on. Make sure to text people, let them know. Not sure if Captain Jen is jumping on today or not. We're just gonna give one more minute. Let's see who jumps in. Got a couple in here between YouTube and Facebook. So I know I jumped on late, so I'm gonna give everybody time. And after last week's internet debacle, will be probably a little bit of an abbreviated study. Hello, Darlene. Good evening.
You called me out of darkness into light, and so I will shine for you. Jesus, I love you, and I really want to be like you.
This building creaks and cracks at night. I'm always thinking there's somebody like at the door or something. Like shifts with the wind. Well, good evening, everybody. We got good crowd here between the two platforms. Turn us on silent here. And so we it never seems to fail recently that Tuesday nights are filled with windy storms and all this other stuff. So I'm watching the flurries outside my office window and blowing, and I'm just been praying that everything holds up after the debacle of last week. So uh, say I was frustrated at the end of Bible study would be an understatement. But it's all right. It's all good. And we got something good for tonight. And so I thought tonight we would just go ahead and just kind of bypass the video. We've already watched that last week and kind of jump in to where we are. And just as a reminder, we're in Mark chapter 14. And it's interesting. So I know Krista and Darlene and there'll be a little bit of a rehash here of some of the stuff that we talked about in Sunday school. So our Bible study in our Sunday school. Hello, Donna. Good evening. Our Bible study in Sunday school have been kind of running parallel, and did not plan it that way, but means that God wanted it that way, and so it has been running kind of side by side. And so our last week we were going to be talking about Jesus into the Garden of Gethsemane and his the things he had to deal with there at that portion, and as we're going forward in this walk here. And Sunday school we were talking about this very thing and about what he was going through there in that night, and really kind of a focus on the humanity of Jesus. And we're not gonna stay in Gethsemane like we did on Sunday. We're gonna be going on a little bit farther, but I find it very interesting how this is running parallel. So if you remember last week, Francis Chan his video was in walking the Via della Rosa and the walk that Jesus took with the cross. And we're going to get to that point here, but if I have one what's the word I'm looking for, not problem with this study, is maybe just a small qualm about it, if you will, is that he didn't go very deep into a lot of this other stuff in between, and kind of was very, very much at the end here an overview, and I thought it could definitely go a little bit deeper. So we just left where Jesus was walking with Peter and the disciples, and he talks to Peter about how he's going to be denying him soon, and Peter very adamantly talking that he will not. And the word in my Bible actually says he emphatically says that, even if I have to die with you, I'll never disown you. And so we go from this walk where Jesus is setting the table for people turning his back on him, his friends leaving him, his disciples leaving him, really setting the table for what he's about to do alone, and has to do alone to fulfill prophecy. And here in verse 32, we find that he is now gone away. And it says here in verse in 32, it says, they went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took Peter, James, and John with him. And he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. We said on Sunday that he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's taking his top three, as Jim, his closest, his inner circle, as Jim described it, for us. And it really was kind of those closest to Jesus at the time in that hierarchy. And he takes them to probably a place where they were going to see Jesus at his most vulnerable. And we talked about so many times throughout Jesus' ministry, he would have to go off and he would need to be recharged. I can relate to Jesus here because I almost see Jesus as an extroverted introvert. And if you don't know what that is, it's what I am. I am very loud and out there, and have no problem being in public and all of these other things. But in reality, I'm actually quite introverted. I actually don't like it. I can do it, and I can, find my place, and I can talk to anyone. My wife, when we were first dating and we were first married, she said, "Man, you can talk to anybody." And I was like, "Oh, she goes, "No, you really can. You can have a conversation with anybody in the world." And I said, "I don't know about that." And we were, I'll never forget, we were at an Olive Garden in Portland, Maine, and a friend of ours was the waitress, and we went to go have dinner, and well, we knew the waitress, so we knew we would get extra breadsticks and extra chocolates at the end. And we're sitting, and kind of kitty corner to us was a gentleman who was deaf, and he ends up spilling his food on his shirt, and we make eye contact, and he just kind of gives me like one of these, like what am I gonna do? And I'm like, and I do the whole like, oh, and we're doing hand motions. I don't know sign language at all, but we're doing hand motions like, oh, you kidding me every time? What do you mean? Oh, what am I gonna? And we had like probably a 30 second to a minute conversation using just hand motions, and we're laughing and everything else. And we get out to the car, and my wife starts cracking up, and I'm like, what? And she goes, "I told you, you can literally have a conversation with anybody, even a deaf guy." And so, I can be in those situations, but the reality is that behind closed doors, I'd rather not be in those situations, and I get pretty exhausted, and I need to go away and be alone and recharge. And that's what Jesus does here. He'll, every time he preaches and teaches and everything, he'll go away and he'll pray by himself. And sometimes he'll just go sleep, as we saw in the boat. But here, he doesn't go off by himself. He takes his three closest, his three the inner circle there, and brings them with him. And he is going in knowing what's about to unfold and what's about to happen, and has already started talking about what's about to happen and what's about to unfold, and knows that betrayals are coming. And he walks in, and here we see, as I stated on Sunday, a prime example of what we believe, that he was truly and properly God and truly and properly man, because it says that he says to his friends, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch." I'm in over my head. This is so much. I just can't. And he feels this. And when we know what that feeling feels like, when we're so overwhelmed and we're upset and everything else, and just it weighs on us physically. And Jesus admits this to his friends, and he goes in to pray. And he goes in to pray to his Father, and he admits that he can't do it. He admits that he doesn't want to. He admits that it's too much. He admits that he's overwhelmed. And he asks God to take it from him. And his dad, God, says no. God does not answer the prayer of his son in the way that his son wanted him to. Now, he says at the end of this prayer, all 3 times that he prays it, not my will, but your will be done. He knows that it's going to ultimately, it's not up to him. But he's asking God, if there's any other way, then take this from me. And God says no. Sometimes our prayers do not get answered. And this is another example of that in Christ's ministry, of a teaching to us. Even in this moment, he's teaching us that sometimes the prayers do not get answered in the way you want them to be. And so his dad says, no, this is the way it has to be. You're the one that has to do this. You're the one that has to go through with this. You're the one that has to take the weight of all that's about to happen. And in the midst of all of this, he's overwhelmed. He's physically ill. He's stressed beyond belief. And he comes out and he finds his friends not doing the simple thing that he asked them to do, which was stay awake. And he kind of takes a little bit of his frustrations from everything that's going on out on them. And he gets more and more upset. Just, what is wrong with you guys? Why can't you stay awake? Like, I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to stay awake. And he's kind of, carrying this over. And he's really showing in this moment the vulnerability of Jesus Christ, the human being. Just imagine all of this that he's trying to take in, sensory-wise, all of this, because we have struggles when we're trying to keep track of things in our lives, and big stuff happens. What if you knew the future? What if you knew what was going to happen and still had to deal with friends not being there, whole thing? Donna, I think, let me see. Is that just on Donna's end, or are you guys able to see and hear me? Somebody else able to give me a thumbs up? I'm showing a strong signal over here. All right, hold on one moment. Let me see if I do this. Hang with me. All right. All right. There we go. Let's see if I went to a little bit of a stronger signal. Hopefully it's there. All right. Darlene is there. Donna, you may have to, if you can still hear us, you may have to reboot yours. For some reason, my printer has decided that it was going to print something. So, apparently somebody's printing to my printer from somewhere else. So who knows what's happening there. And it's a blank page. Well, technology is really out to get us on this end part. So Jesus is experiencing all of this in Gethsemane, and all these frustrations that he's going through. And we find then over here in, let me get my fingers to work. Verse 43, it says, just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared with him. Was a crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. So now it's all going down. We're now, everything's going to be on a bullet train from this point forward. It is full steam ahead to the cross. No going back. You want to talk about an answer quickly to prayer. Jesus was praying for all of this to happen to him, or to not happen to him. And Jesus gets that prayer answered pretty quick by them showing up to arrest him. And this is all full steam ahead. And it says the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck off the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus when they seized him. He fled naked, leaving his garment behind. And so there's so much to unpack here. All right, Don, I'm glad that worked. I believe it was probably on your end there, so we'll have to keep it going with this wind. Who knows what's going on? So Jesus, it's full steam, and Jesus knew who was going to betray him. He called it. He called him out on it. But just because you know something bad's going to happen doesn't mean it hurts any less. And so you got to wonder, how much is Jesus being affected by seeing Judas come in and betray him? And then not only betray him, but to come in with a group. In my Bible, it says here that, auxiliary police are servants of the court assigned to the task of maintaining public order beyond the precincts of the temple. John indicates that at least some of the Roman cohort of soldiers were in the arresting group, along with officers of the temple guard. The fact that some carried clubs suggests that they were conscripted at the last moment. So in other words, they were told to bring this. So what you have here is you have what would be the equivalent of security guards from the temple, along or police specific to that area, and the Roman guards coming under the tell of the chief priest, saying he's going to be a troublemaker. Bring what you need. If you go to New York City and you go into the subway systems, and then and those of you that have done this know that they have their own police there. Amtrak has its own police system, police officers there in that system, and even their own National Guard officers. So be like that for the temple. And Jesus, we know this, he points that out and says, listen, I've been in the temple teaching and preaching. So you think I'm leading some sort of rebellion? Why didn't you arrest me then? Why didn't you get me when I was on your grounds? Why did you have to leave the temple to come get me? He knows what's about to happen. He knows what is going on, but it doesn't stop the fact that he's calling them out, because he wants them to realize how messed up what they're doing is. You get these orders about bring a club to club me. Am I leading a rebellion? Have you seen all of people uprising around? No. I've been in the temple teaching, and yet you did nothing. And yet here they come. And it's interesting in 51 that it's pointed out that there's a young man wearing nothing but a linen garment who was following Jesus. And when they seized him, being Jesus, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. Now, he's not specifically said who this young man is, but it is kind of understood because it makes a lot of sense, then hey, Wendy, that it would be John Mark, the writer of this gospel, was that young man he was following along. He would have been a young man following from a distance, and he was one that kind of watched Jesus from afar, and they believed was, well, not one of the 12, but one of the followers. And a linen garment, ordinarily the outer garment is made of wool. The fine linen garment left behind in the hand of a guard indicates that the youth was from a wealthy family. And we know that that Jean Marc has a medical background, and that, kind of in that family tradition. So he would have had the linen garment that was left behind, was proof more proof that was who this was. And it's my notes do say fled naked is the absence of an undergarment suggests that he had dressed hastily to follow Jesus, which I find interesting. You can you hear he's coming, he's coming. Hey, I got to grab what I can and go, and grab what you could and left. And so, but that is very interesting that it takes us to this point before he kind of identifies himself, but not really. And so they take Jesus to the high priest, and we find here in 53, he's going before the Sanhedrin, and it says they take Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another, not made by man. Yet even then their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He asked. You've heard this blasphemy. What do you think? And they all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. Now, so much to unpack here. So first off, the Sanhedrin, it's the court of the high priest, the chief priest. It would kind of be a Jewish Supreme Court, if you will. And they are given quite a bit of authority. They could not, though, give a conviction of capital punishment, so they could not be the ones to sentence someone to death. They could not be the ones sentence someone to floggings or anything like that. They could give the recommendations to do so. And so Jesus is sat behind him. Peter is following along. So we know that he fled, but he obviously did not fled far enough to where he couldn't know where Jesus was going. And he kind of sneaks in and tries to blend in with the crowd. I find it very interesting that he either the guards are dumb or he's really good at like disguising himself, because I mean, word had to get around. This guy just cut off a guard's ear in the garden, and probably meant people were. I mean, his ear was healed. We know that in the other gospels, but probably was on the lookout for him. We know they were looking for the followers of Christ, and yet he slides right up to the guards and he's sitting around the fire and warming himself, trying to keep track of what's going on with Jesus. And we find that Jesus is sat before the Sanhedrin, and it says that many testified falsely against him. And so it says here in my notes that in Jewish judicial procedure, witnesses functioned as the prosecution. So they would, you wouldn't have the people that were bringing these claims against the defendant, if you will, were the prosecutors. They were the ones bringing the claims. They were the ones bringing the evidence. They were the ones speaking to the events that happened. That's why certain vocations, if you will, were not acceptable in the judicial system. We know, studying at Christmas time, that shepherds' testimonies could not be given for or against anyone, because they were thought to be unclean and thought to be not trustworthy. And so obviously, if you put those words on other professions from the time, you will understand who and who's not allowed to give testimony. And so a person cannot be convicted unless two or more witnesses gave testimony, which meant that they had to agree. So you had to have people say the same thing, the same claim against somebody, in order for someone to get convicted, and they had to match up pretty close. If you have ever watched any episode of Law and Order, you will know that not everybody's testimony, eyewitness testimony, is ever going to match up 100%. There's always something that's a little off on all, but they need to make enough sense to where they match up totally. And so we hear the testimony that is brought up is a very interesting one. Of all the testimonies brought up, and we don't know all of the claims that the people who, mind you, just days before, laying palms and swinging palms and singing praises of Jesus as he entered into the holy city. We don't get all of their testimony, but the one that we do get is when they say, "We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another not made by man." Now, the way it's brought forth to the Sanhedrin is literal. They are literally talking about brick and mortar temple being torn down, and 3 days Jesus building a new one, and in some supernatural way having this temple be rebuilt. But we know, in the benefit of hindsight, that Jesus is using that what they were saying is true, that Jesus was saying that, but he was talking about himself. He was talking that he is going to be literally, willingly getting this temple destroyed, and in 3 days building up back. You could take it, the metaphorical man-made part of, like, we'll tear down the sin that man has brought into this world, the idolization of sin, and in 3 days, by death and then resurrection and payment of that sin, rise up the new kingdom, rise up a new relationship, rise up a new covenant with God. There's so many layers to what that states in there, but they are hearing their building that is so sacred to them be potentially in danger. Now, I don't care what your position is on it, or my position, but the reason why January 6th is considered, so tumultuous is because of the sacredness of the United States Capitol to our country. And this thought of, a potential teardown of that brick and mortar building is why people have strong feelings one way or the other, because of what that means. And that is what the testimony of these people are. The temple is everything to them. It is literally where God lives, with the ark and the chief priest being able to go behind the curtain and everything else. And so we find it very interesting that even in this moment, it's another big old neon sign pointing to the fulfillment of the prophecy and to Jesus' life and death and resurrection. And so we see here that the high priest finally asked Jesus, listen, are you who they say you are? Are you Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? Are you claiming to be the Son of God? Are you the Messiah? Are you the Savior that we've been waiting for? And he says, I am. Very interesting there. Hard stop. Makes me go back, to think, where else did we hear that? Go back to Moses. Who shall I tell them sent me? Tell them I am. And so Jesus gets asked, are you the Son of God? And he says, I am. I'm the same. I am. Fill in the blank. And he says, then you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Here he calls himself the Son of Man, not the Son of God, the Son of Man. Kind of even bringing in that testimony of this temple being torn down. And then we see the 63, the high priest hears this, and it says he tears his clothes. Now, if you remember from Psalms, and in many other studies in Jewish culture, the tearing of clothes was a sign of grief or stress or anger. It was a way to invoke a negative feeling. Think back to David tearing his clothes in Psalms. Think back to Elijah and Mount Carmel and the prophets of Baal. It tore their clothes as they reached out to them. And this tearing of the clothes is just shock, frustration, anger. Like, how dare you? Who do you think you are? And he turns around and says to the rest of the Sanhedrin, case closed. Like he just condemned himself. We don't have to do anything else. You heard it from his lips. He just condemned himself. And then they all condemn him. They all say, absolutely, this is outrageous. This is what he said. And they claim that he has committed blasphemy. It is the sin of blasphemy, invoking the name of Christ as in any way that is an affront to his majesty, to his creation, to his sovereignty, in any way demeaning God, Yahweh, it is just the ultimate. And you gotta kind of put into a little bit in perspective, the name of God, as it should be, is sacred. Jewish, in the Jewish faith and a lot of even Orthodox Christian cultures, when you see God written, you will see G dash D, capital G dash D, because even writing the name of God is frowned upon because he's too holy. It's too holy for our lips, our hands, our thoughts to say his name and to write his name. And so they hold this to this here, and Jesus not only says that he is the Son, he is the Christ. He says he's the Son of Man, who you're going to see sitting on the right hand, the favored hand. The right side was considered the favored side of God himself, coming on the clouds of heaven. He's saying, when this is all said and done, when the prophecies are fulfilled, you will see me coming in on clouds of heaven, the clouds of heaven. And so now he's just put himself on equal plane as God. That's considered the ultimate sin. He has just put himself on this equal plane. And so at this point, they condemn him, and some even begin to beat him and spit on him. And the mocking here, it begins. They start hitting him with their fists and saying, prophesy. Prove it. Prove it. Go ahead. Prophesy. Say something. And if we know, sorry. As we know from some of our other studies and sermons, that the way they knew that a prophet was what they said came true. And if it didn't, so they are goading him. Prophesy. Give us another reason. Give us one more reason to end this. And the guards take him. And it says that they beat him. And we know that's only the beginning. And so, says that Peter was below in the courtyard when one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked at him closely. So mind you, he's standing with the guards. You also were with the Nazarene Jesus, she said. But he denied it. I don't know or understand what you're talking about, he said, and he went out into the entryway. Like, I just picture like so many movie tropes where it's like, the guy's on the run and he saddles up with the cops, and picture a little kid coming in and going, "Hey, weren't you in the bank robbery?" Me? We've seen that. Hey, aren't you with Jesus? I don't know him. No, guys, no, I know, not me. I don't know. See ya. And he takes off. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, "This fellow was one of them." And guys, no, hey, that's not me. And after a little while, those standing near said to Peter, "Surely you are one of them. You're a Galilean." He began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, "I don't know this man you're talking about." Immediately, the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. Now, how did they know he was Galilean? It was his dialect. It was how he spoke. While they're all kind of from the same country, the different regions had different ways of speaking. And so it's I call it, we know about Southern accents and we know about words and the differences and stuff. And it's funny because around here, Western Pennsylvania, we kind of get called Yinzers because down in Pittsburgh area, they say yins or yuns a lot. And then coming over here to Eastern Pennsylvania, we don't have that. And there's so many, we know that throughout the different areas, there's, so many differences, which by the way, there's the one thing that it's been a running joke with Dee and Heather and my wife and I, chicken and waffles. Chicken and waffles is fried chicken over a waffle. Little hot sauce, little maple syrup. Chicken and waffles is not chicken and gravy over a waffle. You put chicken and gravy over mashed potatoes. I don't know what y'all doing around here. I don't know what's wrong with yins. But it's a running it's good. It's a running joke because now it's good both ways. But the difference is really, if I walk in if I say, you come over to my house and say, I'm making chicken and waffles, and I hand you a plate of chicken and waffles with a piece of fried chicken on top of a waffle, you're going to look at me and go, you're not from around here, are you? And that's how they recognize Peter, like by his dialect. And you're not quite from here, right? Oh, okay. See, there's even a chicken and waffle dinner out going on at Mifflinville on Saturday. There we go. And so they go ahead and they call him out, and it says here in 71 that he begins to call down curses on himself, and he swears to them, I don't know the man you're talking about. Just to be brought to a point. Remember, Peter the hothead here is now so frustrated that he keeps getting called out about being a Jesus follower when he knows he's in a situation where he's probably will get arrested for it, and even probably put to death with Jesus. And he starts just losing his mind. I am not that guy. I wasn't with him. It's a short-term memory loss here. Because it wasn't long ago, and he was saying, I would never. I'm going to be with you till the end. And his feet are finally held to the fire of that. And Jesus told him it was going to happen. And then we have Peter have his second aha moment. Remember a couple weeks back, we talked about his first aha moment where he finally got it. And he looked at Jesus and said, you are. Who do they say I am? Who do you say I am? You're the Son of God. Here he has a second aha moment. Here he has a moment where he not only recognizes Jesus' sovereignty, he recognizes his own failures, his own shortcomings. He recognizes that he's a liar. He recognizes that he's unloyal. He recognizes, most of all, that he doesn't have the strength to do it himself. Because if it was him and his brothers, I would totally believe that Peter would think that he would absolutely stand up for Jesus at any point. And then he gets to this moment and he realizes maybe he's not as strong as he thought he was. You know, I wish we had a full breakdown of what Peter actually looked like. I kind of always pictured Peter as a, you know, big honking kind of burly guy, you know, like a real man's man kind of feel. And you realize he's not as big as he thought he was. I had a situation that humbled me in a way that Peter was kind of humbled here, and recognizing that, you know, not quite what you think you are. I was about 19, and I got asked to take the ARC men to a bowling tournament. And so load the 15 passenger with all the guys, and I drive, you know, the hour and a half, and there's a gentleman sitting beside me in the front seat. And so I'm trying to have small talk with him and all this other stuff. And I was a young youth pastor, and you know, I thought I'm in charge kind of guy at this point. And actually I may have been 18. And the whole way down, he doesn't say 2 words to me. It's about an hour and a half trip. He's reading. Big guy. And on the way back, he starts to open up a little bit. And we started talking, and we started talking more and more. And, you know, I'm really kind of, you know, I don't want to say no, I can say I felt kind of pompous over him. You know, he's a guy in drug and alcohol rehab, and I'm the guy working for the Army. And as we talked, I found out that he actually was a lawyer, and he played football for University of Connecticut, which is a Division I school. It's not a huge football program, but it's big enough. And in trying to study and stay awake, he had a kid real young in college, and he ended up getting addicted to cocaine, trying to stay awake to pass the test for his bar exam, and ended up passing the bar, but drugs got the best of him, and he had to get help. And so I find this story, and on one hand, it kind of also, on one hand, I was, you know, kind of in awe of his life story, but on the other hand, it's, you know, guy's addicted to cocaine. So we get to the back home to Erie, and I get out of the 12 passenger van, and I get into my little rinky dink car that I had, and all the guys are out smoking their cigarettes after being in the van for an hour and a half, and I go to back out in the parking lot, and boom, I backed right into somebody else's car. And all the guys are saying, "Mike, go. We didn't see nothing." But I knew I'd never hear the end of that. So the thrift store was in the basement of the ARC there. So I get out and I go down to find whose car it was. And it wasn't like bad, but it was, you know, there was a dent and stuff. And it's this lady, and she was a Karen before the word was even made. And she comes up and she is ripping me a new one. And just, what am I now? What's going, I can't. And I was deer in the headlights. Like, I didn't have any answers for her. I didn't know what was going to happen. This was my first accident. And I'm just wide eyed. And out of the corner of my eye, I see walking over this gentleman. And he walks over and he gets right between the two of us. And he looks at her and says, "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but this is what's going to happen." And he goes like, here, let me get his information and we're going to get yours. And he talks her through and he talks her down, and the police come and he talks to the police on my behalf, and everybody, gets statements from the guys and everything else. And we exchange insurance and all everything. And I realized at that moment, I was not anywhere near as big of a deal as I thought I was. That I was not in that moment able to do any of it on my own. I needed help so bad. And in my mind, I thought, I had it all figured out. And then something happened and my foot, as a leader in the Salvation Army, and here I am in front of all these guys that I was going to be the leader for, and then my feet come to the fire and I have no answers. And so I was humbled that day, and I learned that I could not do it myself. And Peter here, his feet get put to the fire. Keep your word. Are you going to keep your word? You're going to keep what you said? You're going to be the leader that I called you to be? Remember, he says, Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church. Peter literally means rock. He goes from Simon to Peter, literally means rock. And he can't do it. He can't do it. And suddenly he has a second epiphany that not only is Jesus who he said he was, but he is not who he thought he was, being Peter about himself. And so that is when he breaks down and he weeps, because he realizes that he needed Jesus more than he ever knew. And well, that's a good place to end this week as we keep going. Next week, Darlene was talking in Sunday school about this part, and this is where we're about to be getting to kind of some of the rough stuff for sure. And so going to be hard to swallow a lot of this coming up, but man, what a reminder of what Jesus went through for each of us. So I want to pray over you, and we'll end this week on that note. And Lord, I just want to say thank you for the constant reminders that we need you, that we don't have everything figured out. And as we walk this last leg of your journey here on this earth, Lord, let it just be a constant reminder that you are the sovereign Lord and that we need you in every situation. And so God, bless us now and keep us as we continue on. We ask in your name. Amen. There will be no thank you, Don. There will be no Bible study next week. Next Tuesday, my wife and I are out of town on a Seisel, I'll try. My wife and I will be out of town for a retreat, and so we'll be on pause next week. We'll pick up the week after here in chapter 15. All right. Have a great night, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Good night, y'all. Good night, Yins.